Hello and welcome to DNA the Soul, a podcast meant to explore the cultural impacts video games have both in and out of their subculture. I'm your host, James Beauregard, joined today by my co-hosts, Matt,
Luigi,
Joe,
Boomio,
and Kai.
Kung Boo.
Today we are reviewing Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube. This cult classic was originally released in 2001, and it was a launch title for the system.
Quick disclaimer before we start. Today we're going to be spoiling the plot of Luigi's Mansion, which isn't that long. The game's only about 3 hours. So honestly, we recommend going and finding a copy and playing it, and then coming back and watching the show.
So welcome back to our spooky month, the month of October. We are covering some of the more spooky, culturally significant games. Not as scary this week, but I would still say it's a fitting theme, and it's a fun one for sure. So I'm excited.
We had to lure Matt back somehow.
I love this game so much. This game is so much fun. I have so many childhood memories of this game.
this game came out back in 2001 when I was 3 years old. It was the launch title for the Nintendo GameCube. First Nintendo system to not launch with a Mario game as a platformer since, Mario became a thing.
This was widely regarded as a bad move, and they would rectify that with Super Mario Galaxy within the decade. The game was originally revealed at Nintendo Space World, which is a fascinating concept we unfortunately do not have enough time to go into today, but if the words Nintendo Space World interest you at all, I recommend that you, our dear viewer, look it up. Luigi's Mansion was developed by Nintendo EAD, the Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development Department. It's the main development studio for Nintendo hardware, or at least it was. They are responsible for most everything cool that Nintendo's ever made. Everything that got a lot of press releases between the years like 1996 and 2015 that was made by Nintendo most likely had its roots in Nintendo's EAD. They're responsible for F-Zero, Nintendogs, Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, Animal Crossing, Wii Sports, Super Mario Galaxy.
Basically everything fun that's been in Nintendo from those eras.
And we can't forget Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, which might be the lowest point of their entire career. They were originally 6 separate teams that made up the department, and they were unfortunately merged together in 2015 before the Switch came out. So after the Wii U's unenthusiastic reception, but before the release of the Switch.
So the titular character, Luigi, has been around since 1985. He was introduced as Mario's brother to give player 2 something to do while playing. He was never really anything. He was just kind of Green Mario with a different voice up until the release of Luigi's Mansion, in which case he got his entire character from this game, and he still has that in everything that he is to this day.
He's a scared little Italian man.
He is a very cowardly Italian.
He was so cowardly, they used his death for like a trailer for Smash Bros. For the Switch, and I loved that.
But to get into the game, it starts out with Luigi walking through a dark forest because he's won a mansion in a contest that he didn't even enter. And so Mario went ahead of him to find out what the whole thing was about, and no one heard from him since. So Luigi takes his trusty little flashlight and goes through the dark forest to discover what fate befell his brother before entering this big, dark, spooky mansion and getting confronted by ghosts. That's where he runs into Professor Gadd, a scientist who has been studying ghosts for 60 years, and gives Luigi his trusty Poltergust 3000, a vacuum that can suck up ghosts. Then Luigi, after a bit more gameplay, discovers that Mario's been captured by Boos, of which Luigi releases them all from some prison I guess they were just chilling in. Then he just has to hunt down Boos and save Mario. And that's the entire plot of the game.
He pretty much brought all that full experience down on himself.
I know we're not at discussion points quite yet, but also, why were the Boos trapped? Just cuz?
They were chilling. They just wanted to sit in a hole in the ground.
There does seem to be something in greater Mario canon that really likes trapping hordes of Boos all in one spot. There's a part in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door that also has way too many Boos and ghosts trapped inside of one singular location.
200 boos for those math nerds. But the gameplay of Luigi's Mansion is really the entire game because, like we discussed, the entire plot in 2 minutes. So a lot of the gameplay revolves around walking and positioning yourself to hit ghosts with your flashlight to stun them and then suck them up with your vacuum.
We're just gonna have to rip this band-aid off now. This game has a lot of sucking involved. It is the core gameplay mechanic. You have a vacuum cleaner. The game sucks. In a good way.
I felt the booze. Also, no pun intended.
Luigi's boozing up, he's sucking, he's flashing, he's doing whatever he can get away with.
I'm saying I felt the booze from the audience.
Oh, that kind of booze. That makes a lot more sense.
This episode is now more rated 18 plus than our Silent Hill episode. Anyway, there is one mechanic that gets introduced a bit into the game, being the elemental medallions that allow you to suck up elemental ghosts and spew them, blowing them, I guess, out of your vacuum. And those elements are in order: fire, water, and ice. And they, in gameplay, have a bit of a rock, paper, scissors trio going on where you have to use fire on ice, water on fire, and ice on water. They are not, however, used at all in the boss fights, which most of the boss fights are just quickly figuring out one little mechanic that the boss wants you to do, doing that, and then just draining their 100 HP.
Don't you use the ice for Boolossus?
You do actually use the ice on Boolossus. However, he is not exactly a normal boss, given that he doesn't have a health bar. But Boolossus is one of the area bosses, which are the most unique boss fights in the game because they have a bit more going on. The first area boss, being Chauncey the baby, you have to grab his little play balls that he throws in the arena and shoot them back at him, stunning him so that you can vacuum him up.
What a first boss to have.
Yeah, like, that is a dead child in a Mario game. Like, there's no going around that. Like, I'm surprised that got past Nintendo.
It's very cartoony.
Still, you have to.
So.
Like, yes, if you don't think about it, you're just like, oh, it's a ghost baby. And then you're like, oh, it's a ghost baby. That's a little dark for a Nintendo game. So it's interesting they got away with that.
Yes, just about every boss character in this game is not at all hinted to be not a real person. They are all real people that actually died.
Isn't there a pianist that's possessing the piano?
There is a pianist. She is playing on the piano, but yes, she was like a 20-some-year-old woman who just died. The second area boss would be Bogmire, a statue who's not exactly a person. I know I just said they're all people, but he's not. He's just some sort of guardian spirit of the mansion that you have to vacuum up shadows of himself and vomit them back on him to stun him so that you can vacuum him up. And then we get to the mentioned Boolossus in Area 3, which is an amalgam of boos that you have to knock into a point on a unicorn statue and then freeze the individual boos and suck them up.
Remind me, there's very little indication of how to defeat the bosses when you're first introduced to them, right? You're lucky to maybe get a little cutscene showing off their mechanic or gimmick.
Not really, no. You just kind of have to figure things out. The Chauncey boss fight, the first area boss, you at least are hinted at, because in order to initiate the boss fight, you have to hit him with a ball that is in his room.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like you said, there's no hints for the game. They go, hey, figure it out. You're a gamer now. You got this.
Well, there was a bit of a hint system in the game. You could scan different ghosts with the Game Boy, and Luigi would say something that could point towards a possible solution to taking the ghost down.
That was the only reason I ever beat the game. I was not smart enough for most of those situations. And I remember some of the hints it gave me being like, what on earth does that mean? And having to look it up myself.
I never beat the game as a child because the button to release the boos is on the foreground wall, and the only hint that it's there is in a mirror, and I never looked there.
Yeah, I could. It kind of reminds me of the what's the DS game for Legend of Zelda?
Phantom Hourglass.
I know a lot of people got stuck on that kind of puzzle too, where it's like a mechanic you don't really think about using.
But yes, with the boos brings us to the final boss, King Boo. He inhabits a giant Bowser suit, and you have to grab the balls that he throws out, because they're bombs, and you shoot them back at his head when he lowers it down, and then King Boo pops out, and you have to suck up his massive 500 HP health bar while Bowser is throwing his first ever ice attack at you.
Call back to episode 1 of our own podcast here. This is where Bowser snorts ice, except
We
it's
did
not
it.
really Bowser.
We referenced ourselves the first time, so we did it. Good job, guys.
This game also introduced Gadd. He's voiced by Totaka. Totaka is best known probably for Totaka's Song, which is in almost all the games that he worked on at Nintendo. In Luigi's Mansion, you can find it after 3.5 minutes of waiting at the controller configuration menu. I will say that the overall sound direction of Luigi's Mansion is very good, and it is something that I personally enjoy every time I play this game or watch somebody else playing it. The game also supports stereoscopic 3D, which is a feature the GameCube does support. However, that feature was never enabled in the release copy of Luigi's Mansion due to logistical issues. They didn't want to have to tell people to buy a 3D TV to play a launch title.
Hold on. Explain to me who does not know what the heck that means. What?
Yeah. So like a 3D television, you wear 3D glasses, so you could have the ghosts like come out at you from the TV.
I never knew about this feature for the GameCube. That's so cool. Man, the GameCube had a lot of like little features, didn't it? Like I remember one of the things that I had was, I don't know if this was an official thing, but it was the little screen you could put on top of your GameCube so you could portable your GameCube around. Like that's crazy how many things they had.
One of the greatest criticisms of the GameCube when it released was its lack of features. In reality, it supported a ton of different kinds of features, but they were all add-ons pretty much. They were all attachments. So while yes, it could run Game Boy Advance games, yes, you could take it on the go, these were all locked behind attachments and peripherals that you had to purchase for the system.
One other cool thing about Luigi's Mansion is that it also really encaptures the awesomeness of the GameCube controller, because you can slightly press in the shoulder buttons and it only slightly does the thing that you're doing. If you give a full press in, it hard does a shootout of the element or hard vacuums, whereas other consoles at the time, you only had full press. It was only full press. It was really cool that the GameCube did that, and I don't think any console has done that since, except maybe the PS5. I think that has it.
That feature is known as analog inputs, and there are absolutely other systems that support it. Notably, I don't think the PlayStation 1 or 2 did. The GameCube absolutely did.
I think the PS4 also had it actually, but I don't think many games used it. That's the big thing. I feel like it's one of those things where a lot of systems have it. It's used. If it's used, it's not useful. Where in this game, it can actually be useful.
The C-Stick on the Nintendo GameCube controller is also analog inputs, and I know that because of Gottlieb Pinball, which had a patent made for it where the C-Stick would control the plunger that was fired into the game. That was all controlled from the analog inputs on the C-Stick of the GameCube controller.
Wait, that was patented?
They attempted to patent it. They submitted a patent for it. Now, I have some questions for my co-host today. First of all, what would everybody say their favorite boss is in Luigi's Mansion? I'll go first, and I will say it is Chauncey. As much as I don't like how it looks and find it deeply unsettling, it was also the boss that, when I first encountered it, made me go, alright, this is worth sitting through this entire game and trying to figure out as much as I can about it. This is fun.
Chauncey's also like slightly terrifying if you're a little kid, because like you're just like, oh, this is fine, it's a little baby, and then it shrinks you down. You're like, this thing is so big.
I personally would have to say that my favorite boss would be Biff Atlas. He's an optional boss, and I would have to say that my favorite thing about him is not really his boss fight, because you do just kind of hit him with a punching bag 2 or 3 times and he's down. You vacuum him from there. But it is his description that just gets me, because it goes into the fact that his favorite flower is lilies because they represent purity. And that is just a bit of character that did not need to be there and is absolutely hilarious to me.
They really got away with a bunch in this game that I'm just like, wow, what the heck?
It's a lot of interesting choices for the descriptions of the ghosts. I think my favorite personally is, I forget her name, but it was the pianist we mentioned earlier. If anyone remembers her name.
You're gonna feel stupid because it's just Melody.
Oh. Well, I would say Melody's my favorite ghost simply because to interact with her, you have to play the classic Mario theme on all the instruments in the room, and I thought that was kind of fun.
I think that my favorite probably has to be the billiards room, actually. I don't remember his name, but I just loved the idea of like picking up the cue balls and then firing it at him, because I thought that was just a really cool idea.
It was such a cool idea that it was ripped off by Haunted Mansion for the Xbox original.
I just love the animation for when he finally reveals his heart to vacuum him up, because he just kind of gives up. He's just like so sad about the fact that he's been hit. He's just full on drooped over.
I totally forgot about that as well. I thought that was on a different boss, but you're right, I do remember that. He's just like, Oh, that's annoying.
Why is Gadd never invited to the Nintendo party games? Like, Super Monkey Ball lets me play as the Doctor, and I love that.
Have you looked at that man and how insane he is? Do you think you want... Look, Mario Party's crazy enough. Do you need more insanity there?
I'm learning that your fantasy is to play as geriatric old men. Got it.
I think I don't know if he should be a playable character. I think he should have like a spot like Donkey Kong or Bowser where you get like some
Oh,
crazy invention or something.
that sounds so cool. Like, yeah, you get like a special super item, and it's like, all right, this mushroom lets you move like halfway across the board, but you can't control it.
Exactly.
You just go.
I want him to be in tennis and for him to have a super electronic racket where he hits a button and suddenly it's gone absolutely haywire crazy. It is knocking the ball back for him all over the place.
He did actually have a board in Mario Party 6. I believe it was Egad's garage, because I guess his laboratory is just in his garage. So
I think that is actually canon in this game. I'm pretty sure that you like go to his shed and it's just his shed. That's where all the laboratory stuff is.
He needs to be in more stuff. Absolutely, he needs to be in more stuff. Not enough Egad representation in the Mario franchise. Maybe because he's pigeonholed as just a Luigi character, but I think he adds something nobody else really does in their cast. Here's another question. Why did they wait until Luigi's Mansion to introduce Ice Bowser?
Because he's a robot.
well, I think a big thing was that the 2000s were the time to experiment with everything. Like the 90s, you had to set everything up, but in 2001, the whole world changed. You had to make Bowser spewing ice because fire wasn't going to cut it anymore because that was the 90s. And now we're fresh into the 2000s.
It's because Bowser got cool.
Bad.
I deserve that one. I deserve that one.
I just want to see him come back. I wish that Boo had similarly. King Boo is absolutely in stuff, and he never just gets into a giant Bowser robot to freeze all of his competition during any of the party games.
He does, however, run slot machines in Sunshine.
I'd like to ask a question. Is Robot Bowser a Metal Gear?
Is Robot Bowser capable of firing nuclear missiles from
Deploying
anywhere on
nuclear
the planet?
armaments. Is that
Hold
why
on.
Luigi's green?
Bowser, ready the missiles. He has like little Blastoise cannons that just shoot out missiles.
It's Luigi's
Hey.
dirty bomb.
No, I'm just picturing Luigi as Solid Snake. Like instead of a
Hideo-
headband, he just has a green hat.
Hideo Kojima was actually one of the secret writers on Luigi's Mansion.
You think this game had writers?
This game had programmers, and that's it. We all know it. Well, there's probably weren't actually writers. Sorry to all the writers out there who actually probably worked on the game, but it is a simple game.
There might have been like one or two guys that wrote all the dialogue, and that was it.
It had 3 voice actors, and one of them was uncredited Totaka doing Egad's voice.
You had Luigi, you had Toad, and Egad, and the miscellaneous ghosts.
What is everyone's favorite Egad invention in the game? For me, I gotta go with the Game Boy Horror. I thought the style around that was impeccable.
Game Boy Horror was cool. For me, I think it's the various machines that press the ghosts into paintings. That whole cutscene and that music, iconic.
I know it's not in this game, but I love his inventions in Partner in Time, where he makes the giant thing to put out the volcano, because that thing's hilarious.
Isn't he on that island as his younger self at the same time?
Yes. He breaks all the rules, and 5 would be telling him to not talk to each other because they would cause a paradox.
I really like the Boo Radar as the attachment to the Game Boy Horror because it is specifically stated that it is a device that senses round objects that are like Boos.
Can't
So
it find
specific.
the balls for the Chauncey's room?
You don't have it by the time you're fighting Chauncey.
Darn. Nope,
And the ball
misremembering.
is just sitting in the room.
I wonder if you sequence break the game and you get that early, if you can go back and fight him.
There's no way. I don't
I mean, the
believe
game
that.
is pretty broken. Like, you can go through walls and all that. You probably have to beat the first boss to get the radar, though, don't you?
Yes, you do. You get it after beating the 4th boss.
Oh, you probably can't get it then. Darn it. Okay.
What ritual was King Boo trying to perform with Mario on that creepy-looking altar?
Sacrifice. Sacrifice.
I think
Sacrifice.
I think Terminal Montage depicted it best. I don't know if you've all seen that animation.
I have not for that one.
Actually, no.
It's Mario's trapped in a painting on top of a pentagram, and then it just opens a gate to hell.
Like I said, sacrifice. Sacrifice.
The motivations behind the Boos gets creepier with every Mansion game, by the way.
King Boo was just a really big fan of Mario 64 and wanted to see Mario go in the painting himself.
True.
That's funny. I like that. Okay,
Yeah, that
I have a question. We talked about this at the beginning when we said our names, but what's everyone's favorite Boo name?
Game Boy Advance, no question.
I'm personal towards Game Boo Original, just because I want to be different but similar.
I still think mine is Kung Boo or Boolicious.
I personally love Tambourine.
Tambourine.
I also just love that they all have more than one line of text, which they did not have to do. I think each one of them has like 2 or 3 lines each that they can say, which is so much work that is unnecessary, but it also just adds so much flavor, and I love that.
EAD's not like a normal development studio, and I know I went to a little bit on this earlier, but genuinely their primary job was to create fun and innovative experiences for people on Nintendo consoles. That was their job. They did it, at least ideally, they did it because they found it to be fun and entertaining, because they had to.
I have one more question. Why did Luigi walk in with a flashlight? Because if you really think about it, he comes in, he's got this mansion that says, "Oh, look how pretty and wonderful this is." And it's all nice, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go take this flashlight to this nice place." Why did you bring a flashlight, Luigi? It makes no sense.
Because he was walking at night and he practices good safety.
Why was he visiting the mansion he won in the dead of night?
That's what I'm saying. It was why?
He couldn't sleep. He woke up at like 3 a.m. He went there.
Maybe it was an eclipse.
You think King Boo's sacrifice was to cause an eclipse
Yes.
to force Luigi to approach his mansion with a flashlight in hand?
There you go. There's your lore.
Why are the ghosts afraid of a flashlight?
Because they don't like light. Because all the lights are off in every room, and then the moment you turn on the lights, they get stunned. It's not the flashlight itself; they are scared of the light. But I do like the secret lore now of the flashlight was a secret superpowered weapon that he wanted, and that's why they're scared.
I really wish that Luigi's Smash Bros. Kit had access to the flashlight or the poltergust.
We're gonna tangent a tiny bit. Oh my gosh, I wish they would rework the original characters from Smash Bros. Like you said, Luigi, he has the plunger and his grabs, but that's it. Donkey Kong is just a monkey. I wish they'd rework those because there's so many cool things they could do, and they just sit there like, these are good, and it's like, no, make them like their characters. It'd be awesome. Sorry, tangent over.
They acknowledge how special Luigi's Mansion is as a game concept by giving it its own stage. And the main theme song of Luigi's Mansion was orchestrated for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Luigi's Mansion earned a 3 in the before category. The GameCube was just being released when it came out. It was a launch title. The vacuums were certainly a novel experience. If you've ever used a vacuum cleaner before, there is a sense of power there. There's a sense of things moving and shaking, and that is an interesting feeling.
I'm sorry. What? Are you okay? The power of the vacuum comes over me.
Yeah, I mean, vacuuming is an experience. For a lot of games, the concept is I'm putting this person on a journey. With Luigi's Mansion, it's I gave Luigi a vacuum cleaner and he has to beat an entire game with that.
Go, Luigi, go.
Luigi is also quite a well-known character. That also earned it some points in the before category. He was not quite as iconic as Mario, obviously, but just looking at him, you associate him with Mario because he's just taller green Mario. Finally, Luigi's Mansion was used in tech demos for the GameCube. Like we mentioned, it was at Nintendo Space World. A decent bit of footage that was used in the advertisements of the game was not of actual gameplay. It was of demos they made showing off what the GameCube could do. So it had a bit of press coverage leading up to it from that as well. However, it was criticized for not being a Mario platformer. And this doesn't seem as big of a deal to me now, but apparently it was a really big deal back then that the GameCube just didn't have Mario Sunshine in its launch library. That was apparently a huge faux pas.
People really like their Mario jump, man. They want to make sure that they can jump over platforms. That's what they want to do. It's that simple.
I will also note that, while it definitely didn't contribute much to its lead up, there was a Game Watch named Luigi Hammer Toss, which was technically Luigi's first solo venture. However, this was definitely his first video game venture, by far. So, Luigi's Mansion has earned a 4 in this category. It was the best-selling launch title on the Nintendo GameCube. It did manage to outsell Super Mario 64 in its first week, not in overall sales, but in the console's first week of sales, it put out more copies.
Yes, and as we said, this was Luigi's first time being the head man of his own game, and his first time having his name there on the title alone. No Mario, nothing. This was his game, and we wouldn't get it again for 12 years.
No Mario, no matter what.
Also, like a big thing about this game, also during of this is where Luigi's personality came from. We got scared cat Luigi from this. Before this, like we'd said earlier, there was no Luigi. It was just the brother of Mario. Honestly, I feel like Luigi has more personality than Mario from this game alone because they really knew how to characterize him very well, and it was fun.
The Superstar Saga games would later characterize Mario a bit more as the willing but reasonable hero. He's willing to take on any challenge. He's fine with acknowledging his own personal fame, but he does get exasperated at times with what's required of him. But again, he had none of that characterization in 2001. The most you got was Wahoo! It was the 5th best-selling GameCube game overall, and while the experience was considered tight with good mechanics and controls, the game was criticized for its short length. It wound up getting lots of 4 out of 5s and 8 out of 10s because of that.
Like we said, the game is 3-ish hours, so it's a short game, but definitely worth the playthrough.
And they wanted you to pay retail prices for it, so...
Which kind of hurts.
A lot better of a cult classic kind of game now that it's easier to obtain and play. In the then category, the game earned a 2.
I think this is justified. I mean, we did eventually get a sequel. It was just, like we said, 12 years later. And it was exclusive to a handheld until just recently.
This is the SpongeBob meme of 12 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm glad it happened, don't get me wrong, but it could have happened a little quicker.
As for gameplay influences, I think you could argue there was a bit of Poltergust 3000 in Flood, specifically with how it outputs different elements into an environment to interact with them. Some gameplay elements of Luigi's Mansion can be found in other things. I can think of some very underground horror games that involved tracking and hunting down ghosts, like the previously mentioned Haunted Mansion. But those examples are few and far between, and none of them were particularly earth-shattering. Luigi's Mansion is definitely at the top of the pack in the ghost hunting genre.
Yeah, which is why it gets a 2 rather than 3, because it's like very small things where it got influence from.
Sorry, Ghostbusters on the Xbox 360, your save system was horrible, and I never want to play you again.
Now, on to another 3. The Now category, which got a 3. Luigi's Mansion, to this day, is considered a cult classic. Everyone that has played the game almost universally loves it and thinks fondly of it. I have talked to many of people that are Mario fans that specifically bring up Luigi's Mansion just due to how much this game was special to them because it is unique.
It's decently iconic as well. There's a good chance that if somebody knows anything about Nintendo games, they'll know, oh yeah, Luigi's the scared one. And the reason they would know that is because of Luigi's Mansion. This game was very well advertised. I remember being in a McDonald's as a child that had Luigi's Mansion as one of the playable games on their game station in the very unsanitary play area they had.
Also, I know this is like a little bit of a tangent as well, but like remember when they used to have video games at McDonald's? That was the coolest thing ever. We're old.
That is peak 2000s right there. So Luigi's Mansion 3 also released, and this is what raised it above a 2 that it had in the then category. Because Luigi's Mansion has actually been treated better nowadays than it was for the longest time. Luigi's Mansion 3 was a very successful title. It was a very fun experience, multiplayer experience. Strongly recommend for anybody who owns the Switch and wants to just play a game with somebody, check out Luigi's Mansion 3. Some very light puzzle elements, a lot of co-op, fun. It's great. Game's great. You get to play as Luigi. Who wouldn't want to be Luigi?
Also, definitely recommend checking out Luigi's Mansion 2, as they just recently ported it to the Switch and as a bit of a remaster. It's been upscaled to HD, and just it was a real love letter to that game. Which I know it's not the favorite of the series, but me personally, I adore the game, and I would say it's definitely worth playing.
I think my biggest problem with the game originally was that it was hard to get on the DS or 3DS. I can't remember which one it was. But
yeah, it was the 3DS.
But yeah, like being on that console was what made me go, But now that it's on the Switch, it's so much fun. Really, people, if you go and like, oh, I remember not liking that game, playing it on the 3DS, try it on the Switch. It's much better.
Now we're going to move on to some bonus stars. And Luigi's Mansion has earned 3 of them. However, it did not earn the Studio Support Star. Matt, can you explain why?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, 12 years later, that's not really giving it support. It eventually did get support, but a lot of the games when we have talked about support later, they've not been so far in advance. Like, I think the biggest gap that we had also was between N64 and the DS for Mario 64. But that was also a game that didn't need a sequel. It was just one of those things where it was, oh, thank you for doing this.
Super Mario Sunshine.
That's fair, but like it's more so rather than being like it was a direct. This was a game that was like, oh, you could make a direct sequel of this or something, and they just didn't for 12 years.
Yeah, they left this IP alone for a very long time. It did not seem that Nintendo considered it to be particularly successful. They eventually realized there was some love for this game, but they were very cool on it in the decade or so after it released.
Mostly because a lot of the fans, like it being a cult classic, was like, please give us more. And they've, in the last, like, few years of the Switch's life, they've gone back and got a lot of games that were like cult classics and gone, here's a new version of a game, or here's a remake, like Luigi Mansion 2 remake. We got a Pokemon Snap. They've been getting better at taking those old games that were cult classics and making more things for them. But I don't know if that really counts as studio support. So we do not give it the bonus star.
They took that not a platformer thing a bit too hard. It did earn a star for creative contributions. There's an auditory sting for it in the Super Mario movie. Luigi's Mansion is a part of Luigi's characterization in Smash Brothers, although it's kind of unrepresented in his kit. And Luigi's Mansion is still the titular Luigi franchise. It's what he's most associated with today, and Mario is very culturally significant, especially in the creative space. And last of all, it solidified Luigi's personality. If somebody's going to discuss about being a Luigi, I would argue that somebody being accused of being a Luigi is a thing, and B is talking about a very specific character trait of either you're the player 2 or you're the scaredy cat following character of somebody else.
Cough, cough, Tails.
Tails wishes he could be Luigi.
Tails has less emotional damage than Luigi.
All right, and our final bonus star that we're giving is for unintended enjoyment. The speed run from this game is crazy. It is still a very run game, and you only have to beat 4 of the bosses of the game, like the little bosses and the big boss. You beat the parents, the baby, and then you clip through the ceiling and you go straight to Bowser. And that's it. You're done. You're good. It's crazy, and if you do enjoy speed runs, I highly recommend going and watching it. It's got some crazy out of bounds.
Unfortunately, that is not our last star. In fact, our last star is for personal taste. This
Right.
game is very tasty.
I would give this game 100% on my personal taste. This game is a huge part of my childhood, and I love it dearly.
It's fantastic.
I remember going to hang out with one of my family members, and I didn't have this game, but they did. And we sat down and played through this game so much. Like, I'm pretty sure we played through the game maybe 10 plus times altogether in the multiple trips that we did. And it's just such a fun game. It's quick enough that you can play through it in a sitting, but personal taste, 10 out of 10, would recommend.
That leads us to our final score. Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube has earned 1,484 points. Looking to the future, we will be doing a special episode where we will be looking back on the games reviewed thus far and their places. And as for Luigi's place, it's ranked in right underneath Batman Arkham Asylum.
I believe that puts it last on our list, correct, right now?
Currently, yes, it is last on our list. But again, the list is of the most culturally significant games of all time. So even if you don't quite hit the moon with these, you're still landing among the stars for sure. It was a launch title on the GameCube. It was the most successful launch title for the GameCube. And for the success that console had, a decent chunk of it was due to Luigi's Mansion being released as a launch title for it. If we're all going to sign off, and, well, Mario.
Mario?
Mario.
Yeah.
Mario.
Mario, 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 Mario.